Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. I am live today with Mr. Trilobite. How are you doing, Mr. Trilobite?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. What about you?
I'm good. I've named you Mr. Trilobite because you gave me a Trilobite back in 2016, which I gifted to Aaron Ra at the beginning of the debate or near the end of the debate. I don't remember. But yeah, that's it. You know, you've been collecting Trilobites, and so I think that's the most appropriate name for you.
Fair enough.
So you've decided to pick a fight today, Mr. Trilobite, with Mr. Farina, and you're quite critical of him. And we're going to be going over a video of his in which you're saying that he's made historical mistakes. And for someone who's supposed to be an expert and someone who's supposed to be a professor, these are really elementary mistakes, aren't they?
Correct. Yes.
All right,
Not
brilliant.
even philosophical mistakes, but yeah, basically.
Nice. All right, so let's go to his video. There we go.
Any brains. For millennia, humans have wondered just how we got here. Throughout most of human history, any answer to this question was the exclusive domain of religion. But when modern science came about, it wasn't bashful in having a go at this question too. Remarkably, science came to
Funnily enough, just as we get started, he makes a false dichotomy between a scientific perspective and a religious perspective when science flourished under theism, science
True.
flourished under the Islamic caliphate, it flourished under the Christian medieval world, it flourished under theists for centuries. And in fact, the origins of the scientific method and its development and its implications are tied, intrinsically tied to the theistic worldview. So, right off the bat, he's just going off on a tangent away from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
answer it so well
Tell me when you want me to stop the video, right?
Yeah, definitely.
that any discussion of the answer requires many separate disciplines and years of study. We need cosmology to discuss the origin of the universe. Astrophysics is necessary to talk about the formation of the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, and our little Earth. We need chemistry and biochemistry to explain the assembly of molecules and the first living cell.
You have anything to say on that?
No, it's true. You have to, you need to know biology, you need to know chemistry and all that. It's true. Yeah.
Finally, biology allows us to show how the first unicellular organisms eventually gave rise.
So, biology allows us to show how the first basically self replicating molecule came about.
Yeah. Well,
Interesting.
that's not true. I mean, that's the origin of life scenario, which he would admit no one knows. Like, I mean, even Dave would admit no one knows. So it's not true. The RNA world doesn't work. None of it worked. And the only one we've got left was obviously Stephen Meyer's, signature in the cell. It's the only
Yeah.
option we've got that actually works.
Yeah.
Molecules and the first living cell. And finally, biology allows us to show how the first unicellular organisms eventually gave rise to all the incredible species we see on Earth today. Many people remain understandably.
Okay, so he's just made the claim that biology shows how basically we got from the first cell to everything, the elephant, a blade of grass, a bumblebee. But again, that's just a claim. It's just a total claim that there's zero empirical evidence to show this. All they have at best is a theory, and that theory has presumptions and assumptions, and they have data from which they can make some inferences. But to state as if, yeah, we've worked it out, this is what biology shows, again, it's just a sweeping generalization.
Exactly. Even like in Evo Devo, as they call it, or the so-called evolutionary development field, even they would admit that we don't actually know much. Because what Dave's going to argue later on is, well, mutation selection, therefore we know everything. But the truth is, there are systems and processes that are beyond mutation selection, which obviously leads to the problem of how did life develop in the first place. So the Evo Devo, they would basically separate what they would call micro and macro evolution, and they would say, look, these are completely two separate processes. Micro is completely irrelevant. We don't really care about the gene frequencies and their change and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. We care about how the body, how the embryo develop. That's what's more important, and selection mutation simply doesn't explain it. In fact,
Yeah.
in fact, the embryo dies when you do try and explain it through a Darwinian mechanism. But that's a different story. Yeah.
Right.
Incredulous to all of this at face value, since they do not personally possess this mountain of knowledge. But that's why education is so important, along with cultivating a societal attitude that values knowledge and growth rather than adhere.
So he's talking about values, education, but he's more than happy to just mock people and call them clowns when he doesn't really understand what they're talking about.
Good point.
To ancient dogma. As far as biological evolution goes, the evidence for the descent of all life from a single common ancestor is as firm and compelling as the evidence that the Earth goes around the sun. So
What? What's wrong with this guy? Did you hear that?
I heard it, yeah. I mean, for him, it's
What
the
the
origin
hell
of life is equivalent to sending a satellite up to space and just seeing. He wishes, though. He wishes that was the case.
he just said it so casually. The idea that the origin of life, first cell to the tree, is just as clear as the Earth going around the sun. I mean, come on, man. It's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. This is why maybe I've been inviting this guy to debate me on universal common ancestry, and he's not going to accept it because look at this statement that he just made. How is he going to be able to justify that statement?
Not only that, but it's only evolution, right? Only evolution, nothing else. No other theory in science is justified by looking at another field. Like no one says, well, gravity is real because water is H2O or something. No one says that, right? It's only evolution where evolution is true because gravity is true. What's the relevance though? They're completely two separate things. It's only evolution. Have you noticed that? It's only evolution that requires a justification of something else. And as Dawkins once said, that it makes you a fulfilled atheist. No, the theory, gravity doesn't do it. I don't know what all the theories out there are, all these different fields of science. It's just this one particular idea. It's very interesting.
Put it this way, if there's a book with a line and that line has a fact, and the fact is the Earth goes around the sun, say the rest of the book, right, has other things. Can you say the whole book is true simply because that line is true? No, you can't. So the same thing, what's happening here is they're using evidence for something that's clear for making an argument for things which are completely not clear.
Exactly.
All right.
He's going to explain furthermore in the video anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the history of how this understanding came about, starting with a man named Charles Darwin.
Okay.
Charles Darwin was a biologist in the 19th century, and as a child, he was fascinated by nature and living things. In his early 20s, he spent 5 years aboard the HMS Beagle, traveling all around the world. In his travels, he made some profound observations. He noticed that organisms tend to be suited for their specific environments, whether ocean or land, jungle or desert. Organisms have features and behaviors that make them especially suited for their survival.
I just wanted to say something, yeah? Whenever I bring up Darwin, why are you talking about Darwin? Darwin existed so long ago. Their videos, it's like the first thing they begin off with is a homage to Darwin.
Exactly, but he's gone through the history anyway, so it's all right.
Also, he noticed that there is an incredible diversity of life on our planet, what he called life's endless forms most beautiful. There are millions of different species, some of which are unrecognizably different from one another. Even so, there are characteristics that are shared by many forms of life. A lot of animals have the same organs, similar appendages, brains, and behaviors. Darwin wondered how this could be, and he published a hypothesis in his book, The Origin of Species, in 1859. This book almost single-handedly created the field of evolutionary biology, and it remains one of the greatest accomplishments.
It's not that he's wrong here, but it's ironic that I'm not saying Darwin didn't recognize it, but the one who sort of recognized it more than Darwin was his captain Fitzroy, who was a Bible-thumping creationist. It was him who actually informed Darwin that if you notice the turtles from these different islands, they're quite suitable for their, suited for their environment, and they're very different as well. And he recognized it, and he's a Bible-thumping creationist, very strict creationist, right? And he was a captain. And it was him who actually recognized it. It wasn't even Darwin. When people talk about finches, which you will soon, which is a myth, but anyway, in fact, it was.
I mean, what's a myth about the finches?
You'll
Finches
find out.
were there.
No, you'll find out soon because
Okay, cool.
you repeat the myth. You'll repeat it. So you'll see it.
Sure. I just wanted to add, if you want to talk about evolution, you got to go back to the Greeks, you got to go back to the ancient Hindus, you got to go back to the medieval people. You have to talk about Lamarck. I mean, Lamarck is very clear in his book, in which, I mean, Lamarck is who we get the word biology from, right? Lamarck is the one who actually drew a type of tree of life. I mean, he is the one who inspired Darwin and inspired other evolutionists. Just to take evolution back to Darwin just shows the guy's not really well read.
True.
Scientific thought. In it, he describes how descent with modification is responsible for the wide variety of species, as well as the similarities between them, as all life is descended from an ancient common ancestor.
Pause there.
This kind
So go a bit back because he had the text there.
Sure.
Just like 5 seconds. Just a little bit. Let's say, yeah. So you see, the descent with modification, no one denies it. What is it? It's not even new. Darwin didn't even make it up. Maybe the words descent with modification, all right, but the concept, yeah, everybody agrees with it. Is the difference though is the creationists believe descent with limited modification, whilst Darwin obviously implies unlimited modification. That's it. That's the only difference. There's no difference between the two. They literally agree with like 90% on everything. It's the problem of variation. Or I mean, they call it variation. Today we call it mutation. Call it whatever you want. The variation, are they unlimited? Can it just change, after all these years? That's the question. So yeah, that's sort of problem one. Problem number two is everything came from first thing, or I can't see actually. Everything came from one living thing, or one of the first things. Technically, Darwin also believed in a little bit of multiple origins. Tiny little bit.
Okay, so that's something which we could probably, we could probably extrapolate from that a point that Darwin wasn't so firmly committed to universal common ancestry as it's made out to be, but also that Lamarck shouldn't be slated because he definitely believed in multiple origins.
Yeah, so Lamarck was a bit more, let's say, extreme. Darwin was not that extreme. So yeah, generally speaking, he believed in one common or the one ultimate common ancestor of everything, but he didn't mind a little bit of multiple origins, just in case if it doesn't work.
Yeah, although today, the way we are told about multiple origins is as if it's some sort of great heresy.
Correct.
Like it's completely taboo, but obviously it's not.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Righty. Okay, play it. There you go.
As well as the similarities between them, as all life is descended from an ancient common ancestor. This kind of modification was later dubbed evolution, and the process of evolution can now be discussed on the genetic level, with mutations that occur in the genome of a particular organism that alter the products of gene expression, which can then be passed on to offspring. The specifics of this require a modest understanding of biochemistry, so a viewing of that playlist will offer a fuller appreciation of what will be discussed here. But on a basic level, the end result is that if a mutation is favorable, increasing the fitness of the organism is more likely to proliferate and pass on this mutation.
Okay, do you know what? I just want to add something here, right? When I'm making the argument that natural selection plus random mutations, and here he's referring to random mutations, is what created the organism, the mind, the body, the ethics, everything, mind and body, standard self-gene idea. He obviously knows what I'm talking about. But in the debate, you bring up random mutations with him or Aaron Ra or others and natural selection. They're like, why are you talking? I mean, the sentiment is, why are you talking about this? Is, biology's moved on. But no, biology hasn't moved on. That is still the most fundamental idea.
Well, technically you're right, but the mechanism he's talking about of mutation and selection, thing is, the best it can do is either optimize or destroy. It cannot and will not explain how these major defining features of that animal came into existence. You can mutate the DNA as much as you want. You will not get a heart or a lung or whatever, these major organs, basically, right? These major bodies and the whole thing, because that's what developmental gene regulatory network is all about. It's about how does the embryo form. And when you look at how the embryo forms, it has what Davidson called, I mean, he passed away now, but he called them kernels, and he said that these kernels are interconnected, so deep that if you were to change one, the entire embryo dies. So he literally did Neo-Darwinism, like he experimented Neo-Darwinism in real life. And the moment the embryo is forming, and the moment he starts to mutate something, the embryo dies. So Neo-Darwinism doesn't explain this. That's why they're trying to say, well, we have to improve the theory, extended modern synthesis, and all these different words. But the irony of extended synthesis, and even Dave would agree as well, that that there's more to evolution than just mutation selection. But the irony of it is, you just by saying that there's more processes, you just admitted that mutation selection is no longer that relevant anymore. It's just a minor process that just optimizes, doesn't create anything. It optimizes, or it just kills off. That's it.
There's a contention someone's written against you, Mr. Trilobite. Gene duplication is a mutation, Hox genes, and you can have endless forms by modifying Hox genes.
No, I've heard that before, except there's no evidence that this happens. They keep saying it. They say, yeah, well, if you look at these the directory networks and the genes, like the Hox genes and others. In fact, they didn't even believe the Hox genes even existed. They thought every major defining animal, basically, or animals, had their own separate, what would you call them? Let's just say separate genes that were responsible for forming the animal. And they realized, oh crap, turns out all the animals have the same genes, but the difference between them is that the DNA, and of course the cell in general, it regulates it by telling it when to start and when to stop. Turns out the timing, which ironically is in the non-protein coding section of the DNA, the timing of these genes is what actually makes these major differences in the animals. But if you're going to just randomly mutate things, well, you're going to kill off the gene. You're going to kill off the embryo. It's not going to work anymore. That's the problem. So that's why Davidson's research, when he mutated the embryo, he's literally doing Neo-Darwinism right in front of your eyes. Experiment. And the embryo just flat out died. And if the embryo is dead, well, then you got no evolution. If you've got no evolution, then you don't have a mechanism. So Davidson tried to sort of explain this away. First, he says Neo-Darwinism is dead. That's number one, right? He said, look, we can't use Neo-Darwinism anymore. It's a dead theory. It doesn't work. I've tested it. The embryo dies. And I think he just tested it with sea urchins or something. Anyway, so he's trying to explain it in a different way. He's trying to say, well, maybe these regulatory genes, maybe they could change in the past, but they can't change anymore. So before evolution could happen, now, well, we just got selection and mutation, which doesn't really change much. It optimizes pre-existing structures and not explain the existence of these structures in the first place. Big difference.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I'll carry on playing.
If the mutation decreases the fitness of the organism is more likely to die, and that genome is never heard from again. This is easily observable.
By the way, that is the selfish gene idea. So he knows what that is, or at least he knows the concept. But in the debate, he just sounded like he didn't even know what that was.
In bacterial cultures, where a chance mutation results in a bacterium that is.
Do you think he's just reading from a script and he doesn't understand what he's saying?
100%. Because even this bacteria thing. Anyway, let him finish.
Yeah. I mean, this is where horizontal gene transfer comes in, and
resistant to an antibiotic, which then divides while the others die, until the whole culture has descended from that one mutant. This concept, which we will discuss in greater detail later, is called natural selection. We can also discuss evolution.
So the thing is, right, when a bacteria becomes resistant to antibiotics, it is basically equivalent to a lock-in key. Okay. Now, for you to kill the bacteria, the key has to unlock the door. If you unlock the door, you kill the bacteria. Simple as that. Okay.
Yeah.
All that happens in the bacteria is that the lock is mutated. It's ruined. The lock is been destroyed. It's deformed, and because it's deformed, you can no longer basically unlock the door and therefore kill the bacteria. That is it. What has deformation? And remember, the bacteria needs that lock, because the bacteria uses that lock in order to get energy, to get information, all this other stuff in the in the environment, basically. For them to claim that, well, destroying the lock somehow explains evolution, it's just not true. The bacteria is destroying itself, which is why it's resistant. It's not resistant because it gained some, I don't know, some new organ or something. No, it got deformed and it lives now, no problem. The thing is, though, once it gives birth, guess what? They go back to normal. Think about it. Let's just put it this way: if they truly believe that the bacteria are going to just change the way they think, then why do you believe that the shampoo, not the shampoo, the hand wash you buy that supposedly kills 99%? Why do you still believe in it? I mean, if you really believe these mutants are going to remain mutant and they can't, they're going to remain this superpower and they're going to kill us all, well, then why do you believe the hand wash is going to save you? The reason why you believe is because they will give birth to a normal bacteria again, which is not deformed. They're no longer deformed. So when he says they all become mutant, well, if they did, let's just assume they did, well, they're going to all die anyway, because they've deformed themselves. But the truth is, they're going to give birth and it's going to go back to normal. It's not evolution isn't about, evolution is more than just this. It's about the bacteria getting, I don't know, its brain or whatever. I don't know what the hell bacteria has, but the cell structure. It needs to explain its metabolism. It needs to explain how it translates its DNA and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff you have to explain, not, oh, its lock got deformed. Well, good for you. You know what I mean? It's not even relevant, but go on.
Yeah.
In fact, sorry.
Also,
go for it.
Yeah. Also, look, the studies on E. coli, the studies that we've seen on bacteria, we've seen that there is horizontal gene transfer, which is not a process of natural selection and random mutations. We know of natural genetic engineering, right? So what we know at best is natural selection is not a creative force; it's a force of conservation, if anything.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before.
And it's not even a force. It's not even a process. It is a description of a consequential outcome. That's all it is. It's not a teleological process. The way natural selection, the blind watchmaker, and it created his body and mind, like they deify.
Correct.
They personify something which is simply a consequential outcome that we notice in nature. Nothing else.
Exactly. But the thing is, what he's doing here is the false of equivocation. He knows that evolution isn't about deforming the cell or whatever it may be. It's about creating the whole organism, its organs, the whole thing, basically, right? But what he does here is he now redefines evolution as just purely change. Just change. The thing is, if that's how you define evolution, then everybody is an evolution. There's not a single person on earth who isn't. But there's a big difference between, destroying your own lock and being able to be resistant to antibiotics compared to creating a whole, organ and whatnot. Two completely different processes.
I love that you said that, because one of the things I found in his description is he's being so vague that he reduces Darwinism to something absolutely trivial.
Yep.
Right? So if I define Islam as a religion in which people believe in values, okay?
Yeah, everybody's Muslim. Yeah.
Everyone's a Muslim.
Exactly.
So when he is saying Darwinism simply means descent with modification.
Well,
Well,
everybody's
guess
yeah. I'm a
everyone.
Darwin.
That's the problem. That's the problem. So I'm glad you pointed out it's the fallacy of equivocation. It's also the non sequitur fallacy because none of the evidence he provides follows through with a logical conclusion for the Darwinism that we're talking about. And you know what's interesting? All right, off the shelf here, any random book, if I was to get any book on what's it called? Evolution. Here's just a random God delusion, right?
I've got it as well here. Yeah.
It's totally and utterly based upon neo-Darwinism. It doesn't argue for descent with modification. It argues for natural selection and random mutations can explain design, therefore designs an illusion. And design of what? Biodiversity, including algae, worms, grass, bumblebees, Homo sapiens, elephants, everything, right? Millions of species. That's the point. He's simply saying, oh, it's descent with modification. Well, we see descent with modification in the lab.
Exactly.
Aristotle saw descent with modification. Plato saw it. The ancient Hindus saw it. The ancient Muslims saw it. Christians saw it. Nobody cares. Sorry?
Any farmer would have seen it. Just to do some farming or get some animals, let them mate, and they will produce a slightly different creature. But that's not the contention here, though. Everybody believes in that. Everyone believes in descent with modification. The difference here is unlimited modification. Slightly different.
We have somebody here saying Farina is making a YouTube video, not a PhD thesis, so simplifications are expected. Yet simplifications are different to misrepresentations. He's misrepresenting ideas here, especially if you go back to the beginning, right? Inshallah, I'm going to have James Tor. He confirmed today he's going to be on the channel. So we're working out a date that suits both of us. And, you know, one of the things that James Tor has been saying for a while is these claims that we've understood life from the first cell to today, we know how it came about. These are exaggerated. Now, the words being used are myriad. There's a myriad of words. There's an array of words. There's a spectrum. Who cares? The point is, it is speculative at best. It is not concrete. But the way they try and portray it is, yeah, we got it worked out.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there are many articles that would, say that the whole idea of genotype equals phenotype, which is basically Neo-Darwinism anyway, is just oversimplification. It's misleading. It ignores many processes that we're still learning. So if you're still learning
look, one of the things is proofreading, right? So if we're going to say there's a distinction between the replicator, the genes, and the vehicle, the organism, well, how on earth can you have that neat separation? As Dennis Noble points out quite clearly, is that distinction is meaningless, and the selfish gene thesis therefore doesn't make any sense, because in order for replication to happen, you need the proofreading, which is activated by the living cell, and it reduces the rate of mistakes from 1 in 10,000, so 1 in 10 to the power of 4 to 1 in 10 to the power of 10. Now, a lot of Farina fans, they're like, why do you keep referring to Dennis Noble? Well, I can refer to Dennis Noble because he's the main proponent against Neo-Darwinism. But the fact is, his studies that he's referring to go to James Shapiro, they go to Scott Turner, they go to McClintock, they go to Conrad Waddington, they go back all the way to,
Stephen Jay Gould.
Yeah, Stephen Jay Gould, exactly. So the point is, who cares about the name? And this is something that you also pointed out after the debate. You said to me that, I could have said in the debate, okay, fine, you don't like Noble, forget Noble, right? What about these ideas? And the fact is, he didn't even know what Noble's ideas were, and he wouldn't even understand what these ideas are against the pillars. But the point is, these processes exist. You cannot make a distinction between the replicator and the organism. Therefore, this genotype to phenotype one-way causation, right? And this separation between the two, it's completely incoherent.
Exactly. But not only that, but like for example, there's an article here that I've got. I mean, I got loads, but I'll just read one or two here. This was it's in the journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, right? This guy's called Joyner, and he wrote about Neo-Darwinism, and he basically says that I argue that Neo-Darwinism ultimately led to an oversimplified genotype equals phenotype view of human disease, and he basically is going to refute this whole thing. So he's well, if you talk about human disease, I'm assuming he's a physiologist. So he's another physiologist who looks at this and thinks, you know what?
I haven't read that paper. Who is this guy?
Michael Joyner. To be honest, personally, I don't know who he is, but
No, but what's the journal?
Well, I'll give you the name of the research article. It's called "Has Neo-Darwinism Failed Clinical Medicine?" So it is physiology.
Okay. So what year was this?
2014.
Sorry?
2014.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Why on earth do these guys keep saying stop saying neo-Darwinism when you've just randomly pointed out a paper from 2014 which has neo-Darwinism failed medicine? Neo-Darwinism as a term is continuously being used. These guys are like, it's not being used.
Yeah, I got one in 2022 as well. I mean, it's very prevalent, the term neo-Darwin. I mean, of course, you got neo-Darwinism, modern synthesis, both. But like Darwinism, yeah, they use the term neo-Darwinism. For example, there's another one here. Not this one. I've read something else, but this one I'm going to read it later on today. But this one's called Neo-Darwinism Must Mutate to Survive. That's it. Wait,
Yeah.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you in the chat.
No. I've come across that paper before. All right, that the second one that you mentioned. All right, brilliant. What are we doing next?
Just continue. Yeah, let's just.
All right, just 1 second. I love that title, so I'm going to have to share it and show the audience.
Yeah, so like Joyner, for example, he's talking about medicine, so I presume with physiology, right? So it's not just Dennis Noble, there are loads. If you want to talk about paleontology, especially human evolution.
So this is
Yeah.
Neo-Darwinism must mutate to survive.
Yeah, so it describes what Darwinian evolution is, and then sort of explains further on about genetic drift. And he says here, we conclude that macroevolution, as in the evolution that Ed was talking about. Let me see, what was he saying? Because you removed it. Huh? Where is it? He says, where the hell's it gone now? Yeah, we conclude that macroevolution via survival of the fittest is not salvageable by arguments for random genetic drift and other proposed mechanisms. In other words, we need different mechanisms to explain, which is what Eva Diva was all about anyway. So they're trying to say that selection mutation, although cool, don't get me wrong, it explains, like I said, optimized existence. It explains why we have different colors, different sizes, but clearly evolution is a little bit more than just different sizes or optimization. It's the creation of a whole bow plan, for example. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And check out this paper from 2021.
Yeah, Neo-Darwinism again. Yeah.
This is the one I referred to in the debate. Neo-Darwinism still haunts evolutionary theory, written by Hancock and others. And the modern synthesis or Neo-Darwinism, and this guy's trying to say that you can't use these terms interchangeably, right? Long story short, these guys are saying, although debate on this point stimulated significant research and furthered the field, and that basically Neo-Darwinism is alive and well. So they are arguing, not that Neo-Darwinism's dead, like Dennis Noble. They're arguing the Neo-Darwinism or modern synthesis, whatever term you want to use, is still the same thing. That is well and alive, and they're defenders of it. So I use this paper to show that. Sorry,
go down to the last bit. I want to read it properly because it says punctuated equilibrium. Ultimately, we conclude that punctuated equilibrium did not represent a major revolution in evolutionary biology. Yeah, okay. So it's they're trying to compare Neo-Darwinism with punctuated equilibrium, and that if punctuated equilibrium isn't that different, then Neo-Darwinism still lives. That's what they're trying to say. Just based on what I've read here. But the truth is, though, punctuated equilibrium is not just a mere extended version of Neo-Darwinism. Don't get me wrong, Gould does at times appear to say that. It appears.
Okay, so just on that point, didn't he do that later on in life?
Do what?
Like he went back to the altar of Darwinism.
No. That's what people mistake. What they do is they look at the components of Neo-Darwinism, which is what Stephen Jay Gould did. They look at it and he says, "Well, I agree with these components, and if you want to call them Neo-Darwinism, then yeah, I'm a Neo-Darwinist." But he then says,
Yeah.
when we extrapolate, when we try to make a theory out of it, then mine is different. I am no longer Neo-Darwinian. That's the difference.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where my confusion lies, right? I thought he said that. What you said, this is well known. However, what the narrative is after saying that, he went back to Neo-Darwinism.
Yeah, no, never. His last book before he died in 20.
So that's propaganda. All this stuff. Oh my God. So
Yeah.
I used to believe he abandoned Neo-Darwinism and went back to it, but you're telling me he actually apostated and then he never came back.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. He would say that if you define Darwinism as just mutation, as natural selection, well then yeah, we're all Darwinists, of course. But clearly,
That's trivial.
yeah, exactly. He says, but I'm not just arguing for this. I'm arguing for the punctuated equilibrium. I believe there's evo-devo, which means that natural selection is no longer this big force. I believe in structuralism, which is completely denied under Neo-Darwinism.
Okay, so can you? I think it's important to explain what structuralism is. I think that's a good segue to get into.
Okay, I'll keep it very simple. The major difference in biology, not evolution or creation, just biology in general, is how do you explain what appears to be patterns in nature, very distinct patterns throughout the animal kingdom. And there's always been two answers, and there will always be two answers, and there will always be a debate between these two groups. Okay, group number one would say that life is like shapes. Think of a square, think of a triangle, think of a rectangle. Okay, for you to go from a square to a triangle but still remain a shape cannot happen. Impossible. Is the idea of the what's it called, the Platonic idea of perfectionism or something, whatever it is, right? So for me to make a square into a triangle but still remain a shape in between, during the process, is literally an impossible situation. I can't do it. The moment I sort of mess around with the square, it's no longer a four-line square. Well, the moment I open it up and start to change it, that's it. It's no longer a shape, and therefore doesn't exist. That's what structuralists argue, that life is like shapes. For you to go from one shape to another shape, it has to be one big jump. There's no other explanation. From square to triangle, done. Because there's no in between. It's impossible to imagine a shape in between the two. Do you understand? That's structuralism. Life is all about structure. Life is like what do they call, like a chemical formulation, and yeah, so they're sort of strict with that. And most Darwinists in the past, when I say Darwinists, I mean those who believe in Darwin, of course, were structuralists, and a lot of people don't know that. The majority were structuralists. That's why the majority were saltationists. They believe in quick evolution. Hugo de Vries, Goldschmidt, or however you say his name. These people.
What did he call them? Hopeful little monsters or something?
Yeah, exactly. Because of saltationism, he like Archie Thompson and others, they all believed in this form, in this structure. If these structures are real, then
and yeah. So I was thinking about this. We should cover in a separate video Peter Bowler's book, The Eclipse of Darwinism, where it goes over these ideas in some depth.
Yeah.
That should be a separate thing we should go over.
Yeah, Stephen Jay Gould goes on in detail in his big book, and he was inspired by it. That's why he became a punctuated whatever word you want to use.
We're talking about this one. This
that one.
This
so
huge book.
Yeah, chapter 4, I think, and 5. Wait, chapter 4? Yeah, I think 4, 5, and 6.
This has to be, yeah.
He talks about structuralism and stuff like that. Yeah. So the one who popularized it was actually Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So group number one is structuralists. Group number two are, you can call them the functionalists, the adaptationists, whatever you want to call them, right? They believe that all forms that ever existed is due to adaptation.
Yeah.
And of course, these two groups can't merge. You can't. Gould was in this first group, the structuralist group. He was blatantly against the functionalists. Of course, he believed in natural selection, or of course, he believed in mutation. No one denies that. But he believes in other systems, other processes. He believed in structuralism. And if you believe in structuralism, then what you're basically saying is that there are processes within nature that makes certain shapes that is irrelevant to natural selection. Do you see the problem there?
Which is quite contradictory to the
Exactly.
gene-centric perspective.
Exactly. There's another process out there, this mathematical, process out there that does this kind of stuff, like square and all these different
Yeah.
shapes.
Yeah.
So the structuralism argument is coming back, and there's actually a very good book by Richard Delesly. Well, he's the editor, Richard Delesly. It's called Natural Selection. I think he published it back in. Let me check. I forgot now. Richard, because he there's good papers in there. Leslie, Natural Selection. Let me see. Yeah, it's called Natural Selection: Revisiting its Explanatory Role in Evolutionary Biology. And
Yeah.
just to summarize all these different papers, what they're trying to say is, natural selection is no longer this most important idea that we once thought. Literally, they think, you know what, we need to look at structuralism. We need to look into these different mechanisms out there that is just distinct from natural selection. Natural selection works within these ideas, not it doesn't control the whole thing. And so that's the basically it's what the creationists have said from day one, that natural selection is real. Obviously, it's always been real. Everyone knew this. It's centuries before Darwin, but it doesn't design anything, doesn't create anything. It just optimizes or kills off things. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's carry on playing the video.
You go for it.
In greater detail later is called natural selection. We can also discuss evolution in a more historical context by looking at fossils and other types of data. In this way, the theory of evolution by natural selection is a powerful model that correlates an incredible array of observations.
Okay, so at this point, it'd be good to ask him. So, Darwinism, or what he calls evolution by natural selection, it's been corroborated by anatomy, paleontology, biogeography. Does that include physiology? Because
No.
yeah, that's the point. He's saying evolutionary science. Why is physiology not part of that? Obviously, it is.
Exactly. No, what he does, what he will do, he'll just say, well, they all believe in evolution. It's like, yeah, I get it. You all believe in the same idea, but do you guys agree with a mechanism? The whole point of Darwin was that he brought a mechanism forth.
That's right.
But if you now agree that this mechanism doesn't work and there's all these other processes, and you're still trying to figure out how these processes work, then we're back to you're basically back to where Darwin was back in 1836. We're no different. We're back to square one. We're back to the roots. So
we're back on the beagle.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
In this case, as with all others, the word theory does not imply that we are not sure about its validity. In science, the word theory does not imply uncertainty at all. Theories are not guesses. They are models that correlate data. If you like, click on this card to watch a clip with more information about exactly what theories are. As we just said, we can watch bacteria evolve in a petri dish. So evolution itself is not a theory. It's just something that happens. Natural selection is the theory that explains how evolution has produced the vast array of life on Earth.
All right. So clearly he does understand Darwinism, which is natural selection being the theory, because that's what Darwinism is different to the observation of evolution for which he shows the petri dish.
Exactly.
So he doesn't commit the fallacy of equivocation and the non sequitur fallacy out of pure ignorance. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Exactly. He jumps with definitions. If you define evolution as just mere change, then we're all evolutionists, no doubt about it. But once you try to explain, like this picture here, the neck is extending. Well, you're not just talking about the neck here. We're talking about the neck, the veins, the muscles, the bone, the brain,
The,
so many things.
the physiology.
Yeah, the physiology, yeah. When they talk about the neck is becoming bigger or whatever, well, it's a little bit more than just the neck stretching. It's there's a lot of things going on, which requires multiple change at the same time. Because what you're gonna do with the extended neck, but the veins are not connected?
I mean, the way to think about it is, the spandrels, the constraints, the trade-offs, right?
Yes, yes. So you got a big neck.
It's literally a complex system where one cog change could be jamming the system,
Yeah,
altering it beyond repair.
exactly,
It's nothing the way that they try and do it. They try and explain it.
exactly.
Now that we have a few basic concepts straightened out, let's look at Darwin's.
No, we don't. It's like, yeah, it's all sorted out now. Now we can carry on with the propaganda. No.
Work in a bit more detail. The field of paleontology began to develop around the turn of the 19th century, and the fossil record offered some peculiar data. Fossils found deeper in the ground were understood to be older, and there was a distinct pattern in how the older the organism, the less similar it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's not wrong or anything like this, but just to sort of give credit to not even Darwin, not even Lyell, but to William Buckland. A lot of people don't talk about Buckland. It was Buckland, a Christian, right, who actually formed this, and he has a very beautiful picture in his book. In fact, he was paid by some local governor or something, whatever it was. Before the governor died, he gave a lot of money for 6 books to be published, each one, about separate fields. So you got paleontology, you got biology, you got this, that, whatever, right? And there was a lot of money at that time. That was big, big money. And he gave Buckland, the money for him to write books on what we now call paleontology and fossils and whatnot. And he published, I think it was the 6th volume or something. And like I said, there's this amazing picture, and he illustrates it very well, that when you go back, you see this, these fossils. But when you go up, you see other fossils, right? And that's where the whole idea of why are these fossils in these different stratas?
Yeah.
It was him who actually made the whole idea in the first place. And then Lyell takes it, Darwin takes it, and then, you got the theory of evolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he really liked feces fossils, William Buckland. He loved it.
What year was this?
1830s. Yeah, but he'd been developing that idea from like 1910. So not 1810s, 1820s. So like I said, he was a big fan of feces fossils, or croptolite, I think they call it. He loved it. It was his big thing, right? He eats everything. He used to believe in a young Earth, then he started to believe in an old Earth, because remember, he was a Christian. And somehow a cave that had some wolf skeleton or something changed his mind. I don't even know the details anymore. I've forgotten. I read it ages ago. But him, with his research and whatnot, it was him who actually showed that these fossils exist in very particular eras, which means that the world isn't as the way the Bible describes it. It's a bit different. And so that's why he sort of changed his ideas. He now believes in old Earth, and that there were different eras, right? And of course, Darwin would then incorporate this in evolution and then talk about these different eras. And yeah, so it's William Buckland. You have to read it. Yeah, you have to understand William Buckland to understand Darwin.
Yeah. What year are we talking about, Buckland?
Yeah, early 1800s.
Wow. Around the time of Lamarck and Erasmus Darwin and okay.
No, they were dead by then. Yeah, they I think Lamarck died in
1809.
Yeah, so Buckland was just started, right? He became a geologist and basically a paleontologist after that. Well, yeah, just after Lamarck, just after Erasmus Darwin, yeah, and just before Lyell and Darwin.
All right. There's one more thing I want to ask you before we carry on. I'm really enjoying this, by the way. Lamarck, we've discussed a lot over the years, but your view on Lamarck, right? Do you think he was more important than Darwin?
well, he's becoming more important now. You know what I mean? Because at one point he was discarded and no one liked him, right? But now he's sort of coming back, and the it's not just multiple origins that he believed in, but he also believed in was it vitalism or something, where
Yeah.
that the body, the physiology of the organism, it evolves in a particular direction. Do you see what I mean? So you remember that famous example that Stephen Jay Gould gave, which is that if we had the cassette thing and we replay it, evolution would be different every single time. But with Lamarck, slightly different. There will be a lot of similarities because the evolution is encoded within the organism and it evolves in a particular direction. So he still believes in a long time. He still believes in mutation. Still believes in all this stuff, but multiple origins and what you call orthogenesis, that it's within the body somehow. The body take it to a particular direction, not random.
You know, it's like if you look at the data,
Mhm.
it's a good explanation of what is supposed to be explained by convergent evolution. The fact that these patterns repeat themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's what structures would. That's what structures would say. Structures would say that look, there are clearly these patterns. We can't explain this through just pure chance and adaptationists or adaptationism. There has to be structuralism. It has to be real, and if it's real, then there's this other process out there that we still have to, you know, sort of figure out and discuss.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Mr. Atheist is asking, maybe God put the fossils there to test the faith of theists.
there's nothing to test. It's more like testing the faith of the evolutionist, and then specifically the random evolutionist, because if you're a theistic evolutionist, then again the fossil record doesn't really matter because God can do it however He wishes. But if you're a evolutionist who believe in randomness, right, like Dawkins and whatnot, then you must believe in a very strict version of the fossil record, which ironically not a single evolutionists even agree on how the fossil record would look like. They keep saying,
Oh.
well, yeah, humans should be here. Like, yeah, you give me a vague statement, but give me proper data. What year, when, which characteristics? All of a sudden, there's no agreement. And there's a problem. The thing is that when Buckland published his work, right,
Yeah.
I think he put the mammals way after the reptiles, something along those lines, right? And Huxley would argue this point, say, look, it's clearly evolution. Evolution can only explain this, only for them to discover a mammal that was a bit older than what Buckland thought, right? And it became a major problem. So Huxley would then started to rechange the pattern. He's like, oh, well, okay, maybe he wasn't that young, maybe it's a bit older. And then they
Well,
start messing around.
if you're a naturalist, who cares? Mammals, whatever strata you're going to find them in, stratum, who cares?
Yeah, but they
If you're
claim
if you're a naturalist, then something like a Darwinian story is true by logical necessity.
no, true, but they say that we can predict. But the problem is, every time they've been predicting for the last 160 years, turns out the fossil is in the right place. For example, there was this very funny joke that haha, flowers killed the dinosaurs because flowers appeared roughly just after the dinosaurs. And now we know flowers flourished with the dinosaurs. Isn't that a
Really?
contradiction? Yeah, all of a sudden it's no longer a contradiction. It's like,
Bro,
but yeah,
that has to be the most ridiculous thing I've heard in the last
yeah.
hour. And that's saying a lot because we've been watching Farina. So
Yeah, yeah. So what else was there? There's I mean, we could talk about human evolution, right? The
all
problem
right,
with
before that, let's finish this video.
go for it.
Yeah.
Current living organisms. Some geologists of the time proposed that very gradual mechanisms like erosion from wind and water could produce stunning geological features like canyons and valleys over huge time spans. And this led the community to believe that the Earth must be much older than previously thought.
Yeah.
Indeed, prior conceptions of the age of the Earth came only from a literal interpretation of the Bible. But this thinking came to be completely incompatible with the evidence at hand.
Okay, pause that.
Biologists of the time realized
He's not wrong, but it's just that's strict within Europe. If you go outside of Europe, the people had all sorts of ideas, right? Some thought it was old, some thought we don't know. You know what I mean? It wasn't just 6,000 years. Yeah, Christians did. That's just Europe.
No, I mean, I wouldn't even say Christians did. I would say that some Christians did, right? I mean, who cares? It wasn't that the Bible said the world is 6,000 years old. It was an interpretation that some Christians have in the Bible.
But the Bible is for them literal. When you count the the lineage, it clearly is roughly around 6 to 10,000 years. No denial. All the church fathers, as far as I'm aware, Augustine, what's the other guy called as well? You got Augustine, you got, how can I forget his name? The most important guy from Egypt. What's his name? He wrote, I forgot his name now. Origin. That's it. His name is Origin. You got Origin, Augustine, major top. What's it? Also the other guy, the main guy that spread Christianity in what we now call Europe. To be honest, I'm starting to forget some names here, but they all believed in the young Earth. It was just obvious when you read the Bible. It clearly states that the Earth is young. There's no other way of explaining it. But then recently, around the 1800s, everything changed. Now, when Buckland and others realized that there are these different eras, and there's no way that these eras existed together. They must have had these, they must have separated millions of years or however many years. And so therefore the literal interpretation of the Bible cannot be accurate. So Darwin thought the Earth was like 3 million years old. Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Let's carry on.
that if the Earth is indeed billions of years old, changing incredibly slowly through these subtle processes, then the same idea could be
Gradualism.
applied to biological life. Minuscule changes to a species, propagated thousands or millions of times, could eventually produce large-scale transformations in living organisms.
Yeah, in
Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck.
animation, yes, it can. In animation,
Lamarck, our dear friend.
yes.
Did he die in 1829? Oh, his book was published in 1809.
Was it? Okay, then maybe I made a
Yeah,
mistake.
he came up with the term biology. A lot of people don't know that.
Okay.
Lamarck was the first to suggest this kind of evolution, coincidentally in 1809.
No, it wasn't him. People said it before him.
Yep.
The very year that Darwin was born. However, he incorrectly proposed that these changes occurred in individual organisms, where limbs and other features grew or atrophied according to their level of use in the lifetime of that organism. We now understand that no such change occurs within the lifetime of one organism.
I suppose not just within the lifetime, more like within many, many years. You see, Darwin took that idea from him anyway, just like he took it from Chambers.
Where did Darwin's idea of pangenesis come from? That's a Lamarckian idea, and he believed in it.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, Darwin was a good student of Lamarck.
Exactly. But not just of Lamarck, but he also of Robert Chambers. A lot of people ignore Robert Chambers, but Chambers was you could basically call him a Darwinist almost. I mean, yeah, he believed in vitalism as well and whatnot. But when you look at the main evidence for evolution that he writes in his book in 1844, I think, he mentions mutation or variation. He mentions long time. He mentions the embryonic evidence. He mentions, the supposed similarities. He mentions the fossil record, and it's like, well, isn't that all what Darwin mentioned? It's the same thing. And then when people point out that, well, clearly Darwin plagiarized from Chambers, then they get angry. It's like, there's nothing to get angry, but Darwin read the book. He clearly was influenced by it.
Who's that guy you put me into contact with? I interviewed him recently. The guy who says Darwin is completely overrepresented.
You mean George Bacaloni from the Wallace
Project?
Yeah. Yes. So Wallace.
He would say that there's too much credit being given to Darwin here.
Yeah, but Wallace was actually more anti Lamarck than Darwin was.
Yeah, he was, and I feel that this guy was as well, because I remember him rubbishing, not rubbishing, but he was he was saying something about epigenetics and the way that it's, explained is not what it can actually do. I mean, the whole thing is not really, it's not really about epigenetics. It's about genetic assimilation. I mean, often these terms are sort of confused, but fundamentally, no one, from my understanding, no biologist worth their salt rejects epigenetics. It's whether those epigenetic markings can be inherited transgenerationally and it can be assimilated into the genome. That's the real question.
Yeah, and many would say yes. It's a fact as far as I'm aware, anyway. But
Yeah.
Let's
All right.
carry on because I'm going to
Let's
talk about the giraffes afterwards. But
As individuals do not evolve, it is only over many generations that any such changes can occur. But
yeah, that's what
Lamarckism
Lamarck said.
set the stage.
That's what Lamarck said. It's within the individual, but over many years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
For Darwin to take the idea of evolution much further. This accomplishment was catalyzed by his time on the HMS Beagle, which found Darwin exploring.
I mean, the way this script is written, this accomplishment was catalyzed by his timeline. Farina just got, like, somebody else wrote this for him, I think. This isn't the way he talks.
Wait. Let me see. No, because Dave, he does actually mention who writes the script for him, which is good because I prefer to go to his script writers.
Where did he get this idea, Farina? Where did he get this idea? He could call people like Dennis Noble a clown and get away with it and not be held accountable. He was held accountable.
Well, let me see. No, he did not write. No, he wrote this. There's no mention of someone writing the script.
All right.
So I guess, yeah.
Fine.
His words. Yeah.
Let's play it.
Exploring South America and collecting thousands of plants and animals. He gathered his most important evidence on the Galapagos Islands, studying several kinds of mockingbirds and finches.
Yeah.
Some types were unique.
Yeah, see this myth. The whole thing, myth. Never happened. Literally never happened. And the one who actually talked about this was Darwin's I think it was great granddaughter or something, Nora Barlow. She made that up. Okay. She said maybe Darwin was influenced by the finches. It was just a maybe. She didn't say it's true. She said maybe. And then from there on, everybody started accepting it as a fact.
Doesn't this represent the biggest supposed evidence that influenced Darwin?
Yeah, they make it up, but just think about it. Did Darwin ever talk about these finches? Never. Think about the origin of species. He never spoke about it. In his introduction, he never said, in his introductions, he talks about the HMS Beagle. He never says, well, I was in the Galapagos, then I saw the finches, and oh my God, I now believe in No, he never said this. It was made up by his great-granddaughter or granddaughter, whatever it is. Many years later, long dead, and it was, in fact, let's put it this way, he didn't even know they were finches. That's how bad it was. He thought that these finches were different birds. Some were finches, some were black, what was it? The blackbirds, some were whatever. He didn't even know they were finches, let alone made a theory out of them.
Yeah.
The whole thing was fake, literally.
Interesting. All right, let's play the rest.
Unique to a particular island. Some live on 2 or more islands, and most of these were not found anywhere on Earth but here. He reasoned that ancestors of these birds must have arrived from the mainland and then slowly diversified over time, giving rise to these new species.
So he never wrote this.
No. In fact, it was John Gould, and he has no relation to Stephen Jay Gould, but it was John Gould who, in fact, told him these are all finches. He didn't even know they were finches. That's, again, not his fault. In amateur ball, just will make some mistake.
The power of repeating the same thing again and again.
Yeah, well, here's a good example. Yeah, but the idea, you can see how he's putting these birds, these birds, finches, in these different islands, like as if they are limited there, and it's not true. They fly all over. Nothing stops them. It's just that if there are food that they can't chew on, and they're not going to go to the island, they're going to go somewhere that they can chew on. That's it. And these finches that you see, these beaks that he's going to talk about, yeah, they come and go. Sometimes it's thick, sometimes it's thin, sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. How is that evolution? I have no clue. How does that explain anything? It doesn't. Does it explain where the heart came from? No. Does it explain where the foot, the wing, the eye? Nothing. Like,
Yeah.
we get it. Like, we get it. The beak can change. Wow. Like, as if no one knew this before. Get a cat, breed it. It's going to be a slightly different cat. We know that. Anyway, you can carry on. Yeah.
Species. He also reasoned that these species showed examples of adaptation, whereby they possessed characteristics that made them well suited for their environments.
Yeah.
Each
Yeah,
species
so-
had
so
a
both
function
are-
that was addictive.
Technically, it was Fitzroy who did that, but with turtles, not with finches. But you could basically say it was Fitzroy.
Yeah.
Adapted to the food source available on their particular island. He understood that a small change in an organism's characteristics may impact its chances of survival, and this is how he arrived at the notion of natural selection. If a longer beak helps a bird eat more food, then the birds with the longest beaks will be more likely to eat enough to survive.
All of this is really a truism, and this is what we were. I mean,
We already know this, yeah.
yeah.
And again,
And
Darwin
thus
never
passed on
mentioned
the
any of this. But again, like, I get it. He tried to explain Darwinism through these finches now. But did Darwin mention this? No. It wasn't even that major. He never even wrote in his book, The Origin of Species. You'd expect him to write it there, but he never did. So again, these beaks and stuff, they change. 1 minute it's big,
Yeah.
1 minute it's small. It's literally within, let's say, within the gene pool. There's nothing new.
Yeah.
For that, they have to explain how this beak is going to turn to a trunk later on. They can't do that. So it's irrelevant, but you go ahead.
To new offspring. Gradually, over many generations, the beak length of a species will grow until it has become differentiated enough from its ancestors that it merits the distinction of being a completely new species. We must understand that in this way, evolution is completely blind and has no particular trait.
Oh, so he doesn't. He does understand the blind watchmaker.
Yeah. So again, evolution is
He,
blind.
he doesn't. He didn't like me pitching the one-eyed watchmaker versus the blind watchmaker because he knew he'd have to explain what the one-eyed watchmaker analogy that Noble uses means, and he doesn't know what that means.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. He's going to talk about
He
the
was caught like a deer, just with the headlights on it, just like the brain goes blank. You know, I could just tell there were times where he just didn't want to be there.
Or form in mind. It is simply that any physical change that results in enhanced fitness for the organism will result in a higher likelihood of survival and therefore reproduction, and thus those traits are more likely to be passed down. Whether this is the ability to better evade predators.
Again, he's right, but it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. But God, yeah.
It's not only irrelevant, it's like there's nothing overwhelming about this. This is so underwhelming. I mean, this isn't. Look, this is sometimes referred to as microevolution, right, or whatever. It's like who disagrees with this? Nobody. But
No one. We're all evolution.
Yeah, we're all evolutionists from that perspective.
Eat more food, or survive the elements. Over millions of years, a time span now understood.
Look, he went from managing to run away and having a specialized beak to explaining millions of different animals with radically different bodies, just like that, just in one go. It's anyway. I think he's going to talk about giraffes after this because I want to talk about that later on.
But it's so surprising that a idea as simplistic as natural selection plus random mutations accumulating over a long period, which fine, someone can say the beak is getting longer because of random mutations. Obviously, we don't know what's happening within the organism. We don't know whether those are due to point mutations and substitutions, insertions, deletions, whatever. These are, repair, copying errors, whatever. Who cares? We don't know that. But to jump from that to voila, everything, it's just ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
To advancements in geology, one can see how this process could result in the emergence of dramatically.
No, one cannot see. That's the whole point. Look, this is the thing I don't like here. It's like, okay, we can see this, and we're like, yeah, we can see that. Yeah, we can see that. Therefore, we can see that. And it's like, what were we talking about? Calm down. calm down. What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, we can see natural selection, which again is not a personified real thing. It's a description of a consequentialist outcome in nature. Okay, that means from a cell you can get a Homo sapien. From a cell over billions of years, you can get a giraffe. You can get this crazy biodiversity and body forms and body plans. And it's like,
Exactly.
where's the evidence? Stop pointing towards stuff that everybody agrees about. You know,
Exactly.
that's the point. That's the point. And if you look at the blind watchmakers making the same argument,
Yeah, it's just extrapolation, and that's where obviously where the controversy is. Can you extrapolate? And usually those who are like structuralists and those who believe in evil devo and stuff, they would say no, and
yeah,
that's where you have to have other mechanism to explain this. And they just, I mean, some have tried to make a new theory, like Peter Corning, I think his name is. He's trying to make a new theory, and there's all these other different theories, right? You got James
yeah,
Shapiro, obviously. You've got Gould at his time anyway. You've got Michael Lynch. You got God knows whoever. They're all trying to incorporate these different evidences and try to explain evolution. But this idea, just selection, mutation, no one, not even the strictest young Earth creationists deny this. We all agree. But it doesn't explain anything. It just explains like a beak becoming bigger.
well,
It's irrelevant.
you know, if you can walk 10 steps, you can walk 10 miles. That's the argument. And we're like, yeah.
More like no. It's more like you walk 10 steps, therefore you can walk to the moon. That's literally that's where the insanity begins. It's like there's no comparison. Like I get it, it's travel. You're moving from one place to another, but there's a difference. Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, so basically it's like, um so you understand that a human being can in a minute travel 100 meters supposedly. Okay, and in 10 minutes they can travel a kilometer. It's like, yeah, and in 100 minutes they can travel 10 kilometers. Yeah, well, in a million years the same human can travel to the Andromeda galaxy. And it's like, no, because there's a lot of constraints, such as their energy, their time, the fact that they only live 60 years, the fact that they can't get out of space. There's all these constraints, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
I love the way you put it. It's like saying, yeah, we can walk 10 steps, we can walk 10 miles. No, it's a disanalogy. The whole thing is a disanalogy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's carry on with this nonsense.
Different species all over the world as organisms responded to the completely different sets of stimuli present in various earthly environments. Darwin was reluctant to publish these findings because he knew that they would cause a huge backlash. Evolution is still strongly contested by religious communities today, so imagine back then when the science was brand new. He delayed publication, and another naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace put forth a paper presenting conclusions very similar to Darwin's. But then the following year, Darwin published his masterpiece, The Origin of Species. Its logic, evidence, and mechanism were undeniable, and the scientific community quickly accepted that the diversity of life on Earth is indeed the product of evolution by natural selection over millions of years.
So the scientific community at the time accepted this Darwinian story. Then why would Peter Bowler write a book like The Eclipse of Darwinism, right?
No,
Where he's
he's
talking
saying
about,
that no, he's saying they all believed in evolution. Let's put it this way: they rejected Darwinism, but they still accepted evolution.
no, they did, but he's saying they believe in evolution by natural selection.
Oh, then no, that's not true. I mean,
That's not true.
I mean,
Because if you go back and look, I'm going to play it again. Look what he says.
The origin of species. Its logic, evidence, and mechanism were undeniable, and the
yeah,
scientific community
mechanism.
quickly accepted that the diversity of life on Earth is indeed the product of evolution by natural selection over.
No, the mechanism is where till this day actually hasn't changed. It's literally where the controversy is.
That's the point. That's the point. They believed in evolution. They didn't believe in evolution by natural selection as a consensus. That's again a false historical statement. But the guys made so many blunders that it's hard to keep track. But that's just a random one off the cuff we just discovered.
But not just that. So when he says the scientific community, right, he's basically saying he's basically saying that scientific community equals any evolutionist. So he's already like ignoring the creationists that were against him, ignoring all the other people, right? So he's literally defined the scientific community as
Yeah,
the evolutionists, and it's like, well, your definition is wrong. That's point number one. Point number
yeah,
two, which is actually very important, and not many people talk about it. Who spread Darwinism? And no one talks about it. It was the X Club. Who were the X Club? Bunch of politicians and scientists too, and bankers and whatnot, who all came together to basically conspire in order to spread Darwinism and to eliminate creationists, quite literally. That's why they didn't like St. George Mivart. That's why they didn't like Wallace. They were that strict in trying to promote just Darwinism that they even kicked out Wallace. They kicked out St. George Mivart. Both of them are evolutionists, by the way, because they didn't like the idea of you questioning Darwin. Now, in that group, you had major bankers or people who had, connection to bankers. And it's like, mate, this group, the way it's formed, the fact that they're the one who actually made Nature, Nature, the journal, that's who made, the one who made it is X Club. X Club was the one who's behind it. It's literally a conspiracy to spread Darwinism by force and to essentially lie about others that disagree with Darwin. That's why Wallace was pretty much forgotten afterwards, because of their influence. It was so strong that they ignored Wallace, they ignored St. George Mivart. Huxley, for example, he was part of the X Club. He said we need to kill this son of a St. George Mivart. That's how bad it was. But how dare you disagree with Darwin, right? We can only accept what Darwin said. And anyway, Huxley himself rejects what Darwin believed. He became a saltationist. The irony of it, he was very strict and then changes his mind afterwards.
These neo-Darwinists, they are guilty of a fallacy which is known as the no true Scotsman fallacy. Have you come across this before?
No, I think I did, but go ahead.
It's a really interesting fallacy, right? So it goes like this. I make the claim to you, no Scotsman has sugar in their porridge, right? And then you turn around and say, my uncle Angus is a Scotsman and he does put sugar in his porridge. And then I respond, no true Scotsman puts sugar in their porridge. So what I've done is I've done what's known as an ad hoc rescue, right?
Yes,
so what happens is scientific community has writ large had a consensus on evolution by natural selection. And then you say, well, actually, we have people doubting it, such as the people who believe in saltationism, structuralism, or what's that? Self-organization, orthogenesis, whatever. Okay, Lamarckian, whatever. And then they're like, no true scientist, and the true scientist here means excluding everybody that doesn't believe in Neo-Darwinism.
Exactly.
So this is known as a no true Scotsman fallacy, ad hoc rescue fallacy, right? It's an informal fallacy. So what basically is going on with these guys is when you say, oh, no biologist will deny evolution by natural selection, and you point out, well, James Shapiro and Dennis Noble and Scott Turner and all these people, and then it's like Lynn Margulis, downplaying natural selection and saying it's not a creative force. No true biologist. And then you say to them, well, okay, what about Douglas Axe and Paul Nelson and Michael Behe and
the conspiracy?
They are paid propagandists, right? Like every single time they just do an ad hoc rescue.
In fact, I know Dave doesn't know, but if Dave knew, he maybe didn't say what he said in the debate. But basically, the Darwin Correspondence Project.
Yeah,
it was funded by John Templeton Foundation. Partly, anyway, not fully, but
it's quite funny, right?
Yeah.
The essential point is that there is a religious bias, which means you can't trust the person. But what he doesn't realize is that the door swings both ways. So I can turn around and say, well, these neo-Darwinists like Richard Dawkins, they're atheist. Therefore, I can't trust them. I'm not going to take them seriously. And then where will it end? What I mean, I could literally just turn around and say, well, all the biologists who are not theists, I'm not going to take them seriously. Of course, that'd be an absurd thing to do. Yet he's more than comfortable enough to say, well, this guy believes in God. All right.
Okay,
So
what's character assassination? What? So what?
yeah,
What
I mean,
matters is science. Yeah.
these people are paid by the John Templeton Foundation. All right. That's a genetic fallacy. Just deal with. Okay, you know what's funny about this? Okay, it's the Templeton Foundation. All right. What about Dennis Noble publishing in the Linnaean Society,
Yeah, that's not.
in the Royal Society, in
Yeah,
Nature, in Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, over 700 peer-reviewed papers? That's him being paid. And by the way, there's no evidence. I've
yeah,
seen no evidence of him being funded or supported by the Templeton Foundation. But even if he was, who cares?
exactly. What matters is
Like,
the
when I
science.
spoke about Michael Behe, he said, "Oh, he's a paid propagandist by the Discovery Institute," and it's like that's the genetic fallacy.
Exactly. It's irrelevant. Yeah, he has. You see, he has his research. You can either refute it or just leave it. Now he hasn't refuted it, so
Yeah, he got caught out by another biologist at the Discovery Institute, Jonathan McClatchy. He got caught out on Twitter misrepresenting Behe, right? He's
yeah,
misrepresenting his points, and so it's not just the case where he'll mock his opponent and not even understand what they're saying. He will misrepresent his opponent, and he tried to do that with me. He said, "You have to admit that Darwinian evolution, descent with modification, is a fact." And I'm like, yeah, I agree. It's a fact. It's trivial. And I already said I believed it in the past. Like, irrelevant, totally irrelevant. And he thought that was a great got your moment. And when I said it, he didn't know what to do.
you
He
know
didn't know what to do.
yeah
He
he tried.
thought, I think he thought I was going to deny the fact that natural selection exists and random mutations take place.
Exactly. He made this fallacy of
Equivocation.
breaking. Yeah, he broke the system down, right? Into components: natural selection, mutation, which everybody accepts. Everyone, no one rejects it. But it's when he
I
makes
think
it theory of unlimited change and explaining the whole of biodiversity. He made that fallacy, right? He sort of mixed the two together as if they had the same thing. Like,
he
no,
knows that. He knows
yeah,
they're not. He knows.
yeah. Well, whatever. Anyway, so he tried to say, well, you just agreed with the components, so therefore you've answered your own question: is Darwin evolution a fact? And it's like, but that's not what you meant, though. Clearly, you meant a little bit something else. It's like me saying, is creationism a fact? And then I asked Dave, do you believe in selection and mutation? He says yes. Well, there we go. You're a creationist now. There's a clear difference, though. There's a major difference. The components we agree, but how you understand what the components, we could create or what the consequences are, that's where the difference is. And he obviously didn't answer that. He just,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to say he ignored
I mean,
it. It's just things got.
yeah. The question to be put to you is like, oh, Mr. Trilobite, do you agree that sometimes it may be morally virtuous to kill another organism?
Yeah,
Like, for example, you have a snake that's about to kill you or something, right? So you're like, yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, it may be morally virtuous to kill a particular organism. Oh, you agree with Hitler then? So it's like that. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking about? Are you on crack? Have you lost your mind? Has your mind gone to the market to sell potatoes and not returned? Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
Absolutely madness.
Okay, let's carry on with his video. Yeah.
Let's do before we lose track of time. We're here till midnight.
For millions of years. There are those who find this hard to grasp, arguing that species are too dissimilar for one to have evolved from the other. But they neglect to realize that when two species have a common ancestor, there are so many organisms that have been lost to extinction in between the two species being compared. Tiny gradations of change over a huge time span eventually result in visibly different species. So if we take away everything in the middle, the gap.
All right. So my question, whenever I hear this argument, is how do you know that was natural selection and random mutations? They never give the evidence that that's due to natural selection and random mutations.
They assume it. But the thing is, he went way beyond. We forgot to talk about the giraffe things because we sort of skipped over it. But basically, the argument that he made about giraffes, which was responded by St. George Mavat long time ago, and no one had ever responded back to him, right? And basically, what he said is that if the trees are longer and far to reach, then the giraffes with longer necks will to survive, and they get longer necks over time, and the short-necked giraffes go extinct, right? That is the outcome. That's the consequence of your theory. Your theory would predict the extinction of short-necked giraffes, and and the environment being the same for millions of years. Two problems: the environment is never the same like this for millions of years. Problem number one, right? Problem number two is that short-necked giraffes still exist today, and that's a major problem. The third problem is, if the environment is only conducive for long-necked creatures, then by your own standard, all short-necked creatures must go extinct. But all the short-necked creatures that lived with the giraffes back in the day still exist till this very day. How do you explain their existence? So if you Google it, I don't know if you can Google it, type in Okapi, Okapi, and show the picture. It's a short-necked giraffe. They still exist till this very day. How did they survive? If you say, well, they survived.
Okay.
I'll write it down for you, actually. Here we go. It's a blend of zebra and a giraffe, quite literally. It's a short-necked zebra giraffe. It's quite literally. It's a fascinating animal. But the thing is, according to Dave and according to the new sorry,
that's a good example to bring up
of what
you're pointing out.
Oh yeah. So according to the new Darwinian paradigm, short-necked giraffes are extinct, but they're not. They're still here. That's problem number one. Problem number two: all the short-necked creatures are still in existence. They should all go extinct. If all the trees and all the bushes are all so high, then none of the short-necked creatures should have lived, right? If you say, well, they did live because they were bushes, well, then why did the giraffes force themselves for a longer tree? It wouldn't make a difference. The stimuli that he's talking about from the environment no longer exist. And if it no longer exists, then your whole just so storage doesn't work anymore. St. George Mavat pointed this out, three major problems, and then no one responded to him. Not that Darwin tried. He said, well, the giraffes, they were in competition. Yeah, but a giraffe can migrate. It's not a big deal. He doesn't have to remain in competition. He can go to another tree. So it's not even it doesn't explain anything. So that's an okapi. It's quite literally a short-necked giraffe. Still exists today.
Madness.
And all the short-necked creatures are alive till this very day. If the environment is supposed to get rid of all the short-necked creatures, then they should all be extinct. But they're not. They still exist till this day, just like they did supposedly millions of years ago.
Yeah. Right, cool. Let's get the rest of this video.
But this is just the way that one color gradually turns into another on a color wheel.
Yeah.
If the whole wheel,
Pause. Again, look. Yeah. He's technically right. Like, I get what he's trying to say. He's right. The problem is that you see the colors. The color represents the characteristics of each creature. The very thing that they will never tell you. When you tell them, well, how did things evolve? They'll never tell you, well, this character first appeared, then that character first appeared, just like the color gradient, And the distance between the colors is supposed to be the time. Meaning, if I find a purple right next to red, that's a major problem. Enormous problem. It shouldn't be like that. Yet the fossil record is full of this. You have creatures who once upon a time were predicted to have been, evolved over these millions of years, and then all of a sudden, turns out it wasn't even that long. Which begs the question, based on what evidence did you, before, based on what evidence did you have when you made up this idea that, oh, well, we know exactly where they should be? Well, you don't, because you were wrong. You're wrong about the whales. You're wrong about even the human evolution. You were wrong about Phippin Huxley was wrong because of Buckland, the origins of mammals. They believe mammals diversified way after the dinosaurs. Turns out they diversified during the dinosaur period. The whole thing is one big mess. And so when he gives you this very nice, gradient color, which I know what he's trying to say, but the problem is that sometimes we see blue next to red, sometimes red next to pink, sometimes this the distance. Let's say it's 30 centimeters, sometimes it's 15 centimeters, then it's 1 meter, then it's this and that, and it's like, well, you haven't explained anything. You just assume that there's this evolution. You've assumed that you know everything, and then when you're wrong, you just say, "Oh well, it's our fault that we made these mistakes."
Carry on. I'm just coming back one sec.
Yeah, no, just finished. Just wait for you now.
Yeah, I'll play the rest.
Yeah, go for it.
How one color turns into the other. But if we take away all the shades in between, all we see is these two distinct and seemingly unrelated colors. The perils of nature have taken away the vast majority of all species, over 99% of them in fact, and we must keep this in mind so that we can allow ourselves to use the fossil record to fill in the gaps when understanding exactly how animals like the elephant and the manatee really did evolve from a common ancestor. It's not that an animal gave birth to sibling manatees and elephants, nor did a chimpanzee ever give birth to a human, as is popularly suggested by critics of evolution. Instead, an animal gave birth to two nearly identical organisms that initiated divergent paths.
Sorry?
No evolution, no creationists or critics of evolution. It is straw manning. Yes, I mean sometimes they do say, "Oh well, if we came from apes, why do apes still exist?" But technically speaking, obviously, if you look at the Miocene period, they were apes, obviously. But don't get me wrong, creationists don't really say this. Critics of evolution don't really say this. Maybe once or twice some dumb guy said it, but other than that, no one else. Yeah, go on.
Of evolution, which over millions of years and many thousands of generations produced completely divergent sets of characteristics due to differing environmental stimuli. Natural selection is quite easily demonstrable in an analogous but accelerated version, which we call artificial selection. Dogs used to all look kind of like wolves, but once we started selectively breeding specific dogs with other specific dogs to deliberately get the tiniest dog possible, or fastest, or most colorful, or any other arbitrary characteristic, we eventually produced an incredible variety of dog breeds, which are now so numerous only because of human intervention.
The problem here, that's an intelligent process.
Exactly. Orthogenesis, the very thing they don't believe in.
The whole argument in the origin of species is based upon artificial selection.
It is. Yeah, it's an extrapolation, and it's based on the assumption that mutation or variation, as Darwin called it, is unlimited. But with dog breeding or any breeding, you will never be able to mutate this dog into anything else. It will always remain a dog. The whole point of Neo-Darwinism is that this dog can become not a dog. That's literally their argument. But it never happens. We know there are limits. We can push the animal to its very limits to have a big head, big body, big this, or a small this, small that. But in the end, it remains a dog. Evolution doesn't work within constraints, right? That's their argument. But artificial selection, no matter how many times we breed animals, it's always within these constraints. The constraints exist. And of course, that limits natural selection. It limits mutation. It limits evolution, basically. If you believe in evolution, well, you're limited. And if you're limited, why believe in descent modification, as in unlimited modification, in the first place? Yeah.
Yeah. Something to add to that is if you change the definition of species to mean something so trivial as it now has a new feature, or now it's
Well, he doesn't define it anyway, and it's very hard to define it in the first place. But we tend to agree, like, yeah, that cats are different to dogs and whatnot. So species is roughly like this major difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the thing is, we can prove that there are limits by just simply breeding. We've been breeding cats and dogs and pigs for many years, cows and sheep and goats. Then they never become anything but that. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's proven through centuries, decades, millennia of human intervention, but we always get this limited, outcomes.
Yeah, very interesting.
If a future biologist were to study fossils of all these breeds, they would undoubtedly label them as separate species. We have done this extensively with plants as well.
Yeah.
Kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and broccoli are all direct descendants of the wild mustard plant, resulting from artificial selection based on certain traits of the plant. A similar process has produced modern corn, which once looked very different from this familiar image. Darwin realized that this happens in nature at a much slower rate since there is no sentience to guide it. As inherited traits must vary slightly and many offspring fail to survive, nature rewards the individuals best suited for survival with a higher chance of reproducing and thus passing on their traits. This results in the gradual accumulation of favorable traits within a population, which is what creates the illusion that an organism was somehow designed.
Again, that's just extrapolation from surviving because you got a right color to now developing brains and veins and necks and organs and all the enormous amount of chemical reactions that occur every second. There's no comparison, literally. In fact, even worse. Let's just agree with him, right? That, you know, over millions of years, this thing have survived, and therefore, you know, provided the genetics to change. Well, the fact that the creature managed to live for thousands and millions of years, doesn't it show that it was already adapted and was perfectly fine? So what's there to change? There's nothing to change. You were fine for all these years. Why change now? You see the problem? If the environment is so deadly different than before that, you know, only the long-necked giraffes can exist, well, the fact that they even existed and continue to exist for all these years means that they were fine. There was no child in the first place.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For its surroundings. It's incredible to think that so much evidence was compiled in favor of evolution by natural selection, even before we had any understanding of the chromosomal theory of inheritance or gene expression. Now we understand how the genome can be altered through routine errors in the cellular machinery, or exogenous mutants, and how this can act as a source of novel phenotypes. These mutations can...
Whoa. My man just jumped. He's just jumped. He goes from, let's listen to this very carefully, right? Just listen to this last 15 seconds.
Theory of inheritance or gene expression. Now we understand how the genome can be altered.
Now we understand how the genome can be altered. No problem. No problem, my friend.
Through routine errors in the cellular machinery.
Yep, that's fine. Random mutations happen.
Or exogenous mutants.
That's fine as well.
And how this can act as a source of novel phenotypes.
Whoa. And how this can act as a source of novel phenotypes. You can't just throw that in there. We're having a nice little casual chat and you decide to just take out a shotgun. Where did that come from?
Exactly.
That's the problem with these people. It's guys, look, natural selection works. Yay. Random mutations works. Yay. Different types of random mutations exist. Point mutations. Yay. Substitutions, deletions, insertions, copying errors, whatever. Yay. Radiation, whatever. Yay. Therefore, phenotypes, novel phenotypes, new functionality, biodiversity, body forms. And it's like, whoa, my friend. That escalated quickly.
Exactly. And only that, but he's presuming the central dogma as well.
I mean,
yeah.
This is something Noble points out, and this guy hates it when I refer to Noble, so I'll keep referring to him. Okay. No one is saying the central dogma if we define it simply as DNA leads to RNA leads to proteins. Nobody's disagreeing with that. The idea, however, that that's the only causal plane, the only causal level, the only causal pathway, that's wrong, because we can have the external environment evoking epigenetic changes, or we can have the external environment evoking somatic hypermutation. We can have genetic assimilation. That's, I mean, tubulins and all that, all those crazy things that happen that Noble keeps speaking about. That is really undeniable now. It's undeniable. In fact, it's been undeniable for decades. Yes. Barbara McClintock won the Nobel Prize in 1983 for discovering a non-Neo-Darwinian process, something that totally and utterly puts to death the Weismann barrier.
Exactly. Yeah. So he assumes the central dogma, and then the genotype to phenotype. He assumes that. He doesn't prove it. He just assumes it. And obviously now we know there's more to the DNA than just the DNA. There's just more to the process. And remember that these changes that he's talking about, it's only relevant during the embryonic stage. It doesn't matter what mutation I get. I mean, mutations are rare anyway in the first place. But even if I got so many mutations myself, I won't pass it down.
Yeah,
Right?
well,
Very rare would I? Very rare, right?
yeah, just a little point on that.
Yeah.
Mutations, random mutations rather, because obviously we have targeted mutations, random mutations to be precise. Random mutations are reduced, the errors in the genome are reduced during duplication due to the proofreading system initiated by the cell.
Exactly. Exactly.
We should talk about that. The cell has an amazing proofreading system.
Exactly. It has a system that prevents it from evolving in the first place, which is ironic to start with. The whole point of Darwinism is, random mutation keeps happening, and therefore we evolve over time. But then we realize, number one, mutations are rare, and then number two, it actually gets corrected, which means it makes it even more rare. I mean, it was rare already, now it's ultra rare, and which of course then leads to the question: well, how long does it take for an organism to change another organism? And that is, of course, I think Douglas Axe, with his protein experiment, and even Michael Behe with the other guy as well. I forgot his name. They try to answer that question. That okay, let's just get a nice sequence, a nice few thousand whatever sequence, and let's see how long it will take to just change two nucleotide bases and see how long it will take. And then it turns out it's so long.
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
Yeah.
let's just finish this video. Let's play the rest.
Go for it. Can't see anything yet.
Sorry?
I can't see anything.
I was playing it and I didn't share it.
All right, okay, and there. Go on.
Let me go back.
Can be altered through routine errors in the cellular machinery or exogenous mutants, and how this can act as a source of novel phenotypes. These mutations can be subtle, but some can be significant, as there are individual mutations observed in fruit flies that cause the fly to grow legs where antennas should be. So we now have a firm understanding of genetic basis.
Yeah, that will not go. When that mutant gives birth, if it does, it's not going to pass it down.
Right.
It's a mistake. The body will correct it later on. Let's just say, okay, it grew two legs on its head. All right. So it doesn't become anything else. It will remain limited to the variation it has.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah.
Which variation comes to pass. When we combine this with natural selection and an understanding of how characteristics that enhance chances for survival will slowly mold life into new forms over time, just like water slowly erodes rock to form a canyon, we arrive at a powerful comprehension of the origin of all life on Earth. Over the century and a half since Darwin...
That's just such an extrapolation, but anyway.
The entire field of biology has become inextricably intertwined with evolution, such that biology makes no sense whatsoever without evolution.
Okay, do you know what that's so funny about that? If biology does not make sense except in the light of evolution, and physiology is a subfield of biology, then physiology does not make sense except in the light of evolution, and therefore you have the field of evolutionary psychology, which does exist, physiology, which does exist, and guess what? Those are evolutionary biologists. All biologists have to be evolutionary biologists according to this way of thinking.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not true. Biology is not rooted in evolution. Evolution is rooted in biology. Big
That's
difference.
right.
And they always pretend like as if there was no biology before Darwin. No, not true. Not
as if vaccines didn't exist before.
Yeah, it's completely irrelevant. There's no rhyme or reason to even say this, but he does it. It's part of the propaganda. And
it's part of the propaganda.
For contextual basis. So let's move forward and look at some of the evidence that has cropped up to make evolutionary biology consistent far beyond reasonable doubt. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials.
That's
well, subscribe to your channel so you can mislead the public. You know, one thing I find funny, is I refuse to make any videos on Farina refuting him, right, on anything until I debated him. That was my plan.
Yes,
he ran away from me for a long time, and his audience, right, they were egging me on and being like, why don't you debate him? Why don't you refute him? Why don't you respond to him? Come on, right? Now that I've debated him, alhamdulillah, and he was shown to be wanting. He was shown to be, underwhelming. It was a lackluster performance in which he committed. This is quite funny. Not only did he not know genetic assimilation, he didn't know about causality, he didn't know about somatic hypermutation. He committed the fallacy of equivocation of non sequitur and the genetic fallacy and the red herring fallacy. On top of all of that, now his fans are saying, why are you attacking him? Why are you? He's living rent free in your head. And it's like, I'm doing what you guys wanted, which is responding to him. So now that their guy has been humiliated online, they want this to stop, and they're like, "Oh, how come you're making more videos on him?" Well, obviously, I'm gonna milk this. What in the world possesses these Farina fan bots to think that I'm not gonna milk this situation? Of course, I am.
Exactly. I mean, there are other videos that he makes. Because for me, I don't concentrate too much on the evolutionary theory itself, like how did biodiversity happen, based on what theory. I mean, I know there are many theories out there, but I like my hobby has been and always has been human evolution. I've always read about human evolution for many years. So when I read the paleontologist view, you see a very different pattern. So you know how he said, you need all these different fields.
Okay,
all
so just
yeah.
on that point, because I need to head off home.
Yeah.
and-
Okay. Oh yeah.
So let's do human evolution another time.
Definitely. Yeah. No worries. That's fine. Yeah.
Smash it, bro. All right, may Allah bless you, man.
I mean, all right. You take care of yourself.
Yeah, there. Speak soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. All right.
Bye.
Sounds